Welcome everybody to the blame game for the round robin stage of MSI 2017. Now it was a long, grueling 5 days of play, and at the end of it, both TSM and Gigabyte Marines have failed to move on to the bracket stage. Because there were so many games, I'm not really going to get into specifics as much and look at things in a broader sense overall. We'll kick things off with TSM. Wow, what a surprise. Almost every individual on the team except for Bjergsen really picked up heat at some point over the round robin stage. So I'll be talking about the team and the players as a whole. Starting with the most recent and vocal complaint in Parth. TSM's drafts came under sporadic fire over the course of the event, which culminated in their games versus Flash Wolves when they were criticized for having very few proactive playmaking tools as well as having some bad bans. Now there is the possibility that TSM lost to Betty's Cog and Twitch in scrims and did not want to play against them here in the final games, but I find that a little bit hard to believe. Even if that was the case, Flash Wolves haven't really shown a desire to pick and play those champions, so it would have been better to leave those up in the face of what was his favorite champion to play over the course of the event in Ashe. On the other hand, Flash Wolves' second ban phase hits Bjergsen's champ pool pretty hard and forces him onto the Rise vs Talia matchup where he struggles to have an impact in the game. They have no priority in basically any lanes, and their comp struggles to do things and force action later on in the game. Now, that draft, and probably the one versus Gigabyte Marines where they left up the Gragas pick aside, I did not feel like most of the drafting issues surrounding TSM at this event rest solely on Parth's shoulders. Drafting problems, like a lot of other things in League of Legends, are usually a symptom of a team issue, something like vision control or bad lane assignments. It doesn't rest on a single person. Is it exclusively Parth's fault that Bjergsen or the rest of the team can't play assassins? They had no Fizz games, which also disables it from being a flex pick, which is what made it such a strong champion in the first place of this event. There's no LeBlanc, no Echo, no anything, no assassins at all. I felt like TSM crutched on Bjergsen having a ranged wave clear champion and couldn't really play 1-3-1 into the mid and late game. They also apparently had no answers to Syndra, which is usually what you use an assassin for, and as a result TSM banned it a number of times despite it being one of Bjergsen's best champions. That said, I think Bjergsen played fine, and I am not putting this exclusively on him, but it did feel like the mid-champ pool was a little bit of an issue at this event. It's also a problem that the team struggled to play the protect the AD carry style compositions that became one of the strongest options in the meta. Turtle has both a unreliable laning phase and positioning in the late game that makes building a strategy like this around him very dangerous. We saw them run this protect style comp once at the very beginning against Gigabyte Marines, which hypothetically it's a good comp against them, but it didn't go well and they completely abandoned it unless they were getting Ivern and Karma, which are two of TSM's best champions anyways. I think TSM's drafts were a problem at this event, but aside for a specific situation or two, I wouldn't exclusively blame Parth for them. I also think that when you watch their games, there were a ton of other things going wrong that were much bigger issues as well. Moving on to the team as a whole, I feel like most fans should have seen these issues coming a mile away. Were you guys watching the same team as me during the regular season and finals? TSM struggled exactly like you should have expected them to. What is way more surprising is the fact that they almost got out of groups because every team, minus SKT and kinda WE, were playing at TSM's level. Turtle had his classic standout Turtle moments that we all knew were coming, but they were relatively few and far between, and as the event went on, he seemed to settle into his role, especially as TSM kind of found the champs that worked for him at the event. Now, that's not to say he played well, because he was pretty much the second worst performing AD carry at the event, ahead of Slay and just behind Betty, but for the most part, TSM weren't losing games off his individual mistakes. It was much more about the fact that they were struggling to play in the late game. This brings us over to Sven, and oh boy, yeah, I'd say the criticisms are pretty fair. Now, we all know Sven has those games, and you know what I'm talking about. Surprise, surprise, they continue to happen on at the international stage, but now that they're up against even better competition, they get punished even harder. Unlike Turtle, it felt like he continued to struggle and didn't really improve over the course of the event. The only thing saving him from being the clear-cut worst jungler at the event was the fact that Trick was there and was playing games that weren't happening in Europe. The two of them were truly in a league of their own. The only problem is that league is way below the other junglers at the event. If you want to look at kills, death percent, whatever, they're so far below the others, it's kind of crazy. We interrupt your regularly scheduled TSM broadcast to throw in a section about how, yes, the flame about Trick is justified. The new pick is one that I hate and respect at the same time. Putting Trick on it covers up a couple of his weaknesses while accentuating the other strengths of G2, so it's smart in that sense, but it is just sad that that is what it has come to. Trick's also basically been a dud at 3 international competitions in a row, except for kind of the first MSI when the rest of G2 was struggling with internal turmoil. Fans are right to expect more out of him considering he is such a critical factor of the team's domestic success and he cannot transfer that to the international stage. Back to the TSM hate train, rapid fire round. Bifrost kind of sucked hard in the last game, but for the majority of the tournament, played decently, did his job, didn't die even when he was on melee champions, young guy, nerves will improve, blah, 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 blah. Alrighty, moving on to Hauntzer. Now, I think this is actually one of the bigger issues for TSM at this event. Though it doesn't rest squarely on his shoulders, a large chunk of it is on the team and limiting his ability to shine. Coming into the event, a lot of people were saying that the top lane pool was relatively weak and that if there's one area that TSM should have an advantage in, it is in the top lane. Maybe it was just a misjudgment by experts, but either way, it did feel like TSM was missing their number 2 guy as Hauntzer failed to influence games the same way he did domestically. By many individual statistics, Hauntzer was top 2 with Huni, but it definitely felt like he was a bit of a non-factor in the games. Now, I said it was largely a team issue because TSM was atrocious at playing around side lanes and often left Hauntzer out to dry. Opponents were free to aggressively attack Hauntzer in side lanes and almost never needed to worry about TSM taking something back on the other side of the map. Frequently, this is on the top laner as well for being exposed when his team is not in position to take something, but for the most part, it felt like it was the 4-man core letting Hauntzer down. That's pretty much the story of TSM at MSI, where you can point out some clear individual mistakes that were happening, but for the most part, it was that their teamwork was lacking compared to everyone else at the event. The High 5 Comment of the Week award is brought to you by my patron Al L and goes to the Cursed Troll. Now, I don't know if this is his or it's some kind of you made this, I made this situation that they ripped off of 4chan or something, but either way, this flowchart is hilarious and it was accurate all the way up until the last day. That does it for this episode of The Blame Game, and thank God TSM are out so I can finally start talking about other teams. Just kidding, of course, I will gladly talk about whatever is getting crapped on Reddit that week. Now, there's going to be the finals next week, which I will, of course, have a blame game for, so be sure to tune in next week for that one. Plug time, woo! If you guys haven't checked out my Patreon yet, please do so. It's in the description below and maybe on screen here. It depends how lazy I am. I'm going to be posting some exclusive content on there in the future, but it's mostly going to be random outtakes and dumb stuff because I want to put everything of value, up on my YouTube. So please check it out and contribute if you can. If you don't have the means to, that's totally fine. I appreciate even just a sub on the YouTube and a follow on Twitter. Thank you.